After World War II ended in May 1945, Nazi Germany lay in ruins. The Allies occupied the country and faced a daunting challenge: how to rebuild a destroyed nation and deal with the millions of Germans who had supported the Nazi regime. The process of denazification was launched to remove Nazi ideology from public life and to ensure such atrocities would never happen again. High-ranking Nazi officials were the first to be brought to justice. Many committed suicide, including Hitler, Goebbels, and Heinrich Himmler. Others, like Hermann Göring and Joachim von Ribbentrop, were captured and stood trial at the Nuremberg Tribunal, a groundbreaking international court held in the German city of Nuremberg. For the first time, crimes against humanity and crimes against peace were defined and prosecuted. The trials lasted over a year, involving more than 400 hearings. Despite the obvious guilt of many, prosecutors still had to gather solid evidence. In the end, only 11 people were sentenced to death. Göring escaped execution by committing suicide just hours before he was to be hanged. Some Nazis received prison sentences. Rudolf Hess, once one of Hitler's closest allies, was imprisoned until 1987. He became a symbol for neo-Nazis, who demanded his release, arguing he had acted for peace. Despite this, he never renounced Hitler. In East Germany, under Soviet control, denazification was harsh. The regime removed former Nazis from all institutions and even repurposed former concentration camps as prisons. Thousands of prisoners died from harsh conditions, and not all of them were guilty of war crimes. Meanwhile, West Germany, controlled by the US, UK, and France, took a more pragmatic approach. The Americans tried to process millions of Germans by distributing questionnaires about Nazi affiliations. Eventually, special tribunals were set up to classify citizens into 5 categories based on their involvement. Many avoided punishment by claiming ignorance or opposing the regime in secret. The so-called Purcell certificate, named after a popular detergent, was a form of social proof used to clear individuals by collecting testimonies from respected citizens. As a result, many real perpetrators escaped justice. In the British zone, only the most notorious Nazis were removed. Stability was prioritized, and former party members remained in key positions. In France's zone, early denazification was more emotional and included property seizures and violence. However, efforts slowed down by 1949 when West Germany was established. One method used by the Allies was shock therapy. Germans were forced to visit concentration camps, witness the mass graves, and even help bury the dead. While some were deeply affected, others denied everything, claiming the scenes were staged or the crimes committed by others. In the 1950s, German society largely chose silence. Many felt they were victims of war, not perpetrators. True national reflection began in the late 1960s, when a new generation started asking uncomfortable questions. They demanded accountability from their parents, professors, and public officials. The 1968 student movement marked a turning point. Protesters exposed former Nazis in positions of power, and many were forced to resign. Schools began teaching a more honest version of history. Germany was finally forced to confront its past. One pivotal event was the Frankfurt Auschwitz Trials. Unlike Nuremberg, which focused on Nazi leadership, these trials prosecuted ordinary people, guards, medics, and administrators. Survivors testified in German about the atrocities they endured. Although sentences were often lenient, the trials broke the silence and brought the Holocaust into public discourse. While Germany made denazification a national priority, the process played out differently in other Axis countries. In Italy, former fascists were quickly released after a brief period of justice. The fascist ideology survived in new political parties, and many former officials returned to public life. Japan, occupied solely by the US, avoided division but experienced similar reforms. The emperor remained on the throne to maintain stability, while military leaders were tried in Tokyo. However, by 1950, the US shifted priorities due to the Cold War, releasing many convicted officials and reintegrating others. Unlike Germany, where Nazism became taboo and nationally condemned, both Italy and Japan had a weaker reckoning with their wartime pasts. Many former leaders escaped serious consequences, and national narratives often downplayed their country's roles in the conflict. Denazification was imperfect, but in Germany it eventually became part of national identity. Through public trials, education, and generational change, the country confronted its dark past. This transformation wasn't immediate, but over time, it helped Germany redefine itself.